When we're thinking about developing diverse inclusion strategies, an essential thing that we have to be really hot on is data collection. So a couple of really themes here is we've got to think about the categories that we're using to collect data. So often we'll use HR systems like Workday or whatever systems organizations use. Those categories are often centric based on the country that's developed the platform. So we really need to make sure that we are using inclusive language in terms of the categories that we're collecting data. So that's the first thing. The second thing we need to start thinking about when we're collecting data is where are we collecting it? So we need to make sure that we're absolutely collecting data across the whole employee life cycle. Lots of organizations are great at collecting data in terms of, say, one stage of the employee life cycle, but also one stage of one stage. What do I mean by that? So I often mean if you take one stage of, say, hiring, we might collect data on something like attraction or candidate applications. If we want to be really smart about data, we've got to make sure we're using data and drilling down into each key element. So with hiring, we've got to collect data on who's applying for roles, who's been shortlisted, who's been interviewed, who's been appointed, etc. And we have to drill that down all the way through across the whole of the employee life cycle. I think where some organizations make a mistake is they often collect data on some protected groups and not others. So that's one error of thinking. I think the second thing that they do is they often collect data, but they don't analyze and track the data, and they don't utilize data to inform organizational thinking. That's the second error of thinking. I think the third thing that organizations need to do is they need to absolutely take an intersection approach to data analytics and analysis. Data analytics and analysis using an intersection approach is going to give you more insight than anything else. And the other final kind of big strategic error of thinking is we often collect data on diversity and we're fundamentally lacking data on organizational inclusivity. So we've got to start thinking about how do we measure, which we can do quite easily, and track data on concepts like belonging, respect, psychological safety, because it's that stuff which is also going to help to drive organizational actions, as well as some of the kind of structural stuff on diversity, which is really about representation. There's some big challenges around data collection. And I think, one of the biggest ones is really around, trust and confidence in the system. There's some human questions that people ask, which is, if you're asking me to share stuff about myself, which I consider to be quite personal. So if you're asking me to share things like whether I have a disability or not, or my sexual orientation or my religion, the natural question I'm going to ask is, well, where is this information going? Who's going to see it? What are you doing with it? So I think actually organizations really should be quite heavy on the comms and making sure that we're building trust in data systems by making sure those systems are secure, that they are confidential in terms of what we're doing with that information. And I think once we've got that kind of confidentiality and the security around the data, I think that's when we get people feeling much more confident, and therefore the trust's building around, okay, well, I'm now willing to share and the rest of it. But I think we need to recognize that trust takes time to build and all of that. And of course, people are always entitled not to share the data if they don't wish to.